Tonight in Greater Boston, Mass and Cass may be clear of tents, but the underlying issues of addiction and homelessness very much remain. Mayor Michelle Wu's senior advisor on the issue, Dr. Monica Bharel, joins me on the city's next steps. And later, the head of the NAACP in Boston, Tanisha Sullivan, on her just-announced run for Massachusetts Secretary of State. And finally, Boston Globe NFL writer Ben Volin joins me on what's next for the Patriots after an embarrassing end of the season and whether New England will ever get over Tom Brady. Today marks 1 week since Boston cleared the last of scores of tents and the people inside them from the area known as Mass and Cass. City officials say they've placed more than 150 people who've been living in the encampment into short-term housing, including a 41-bed program at a hotel in Mission Hill, a 30-unit cluster of temporary cottages at Shattuck Hospital in JP, and a 60-unit vacant hotel near Mass and Cass, in addition to more traditional shelter beds. But that doesn't cover everyone, including at least a few people who said they hadn't heard from anyone from the city about those options until eviction day. And of course, the tents in Mass and Cass were just one symptom of a much bigger problem that's not going away anytime soon, as Mayor Michelle Wu has acknowledged.
I want to be clear that we did not solve homelessness. The push and the fight to address homelessness and substance use and mental health continues with even more urgency now.
I'm joined now by the woman who's leading that fight, the mayor's senior advisor on Mass and Cass, Dr. Monica Bharel, former state public health commissioner and former chief medical officer for Boston Healthcare for the Homeless. Doctor, it's really good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Nice to see you again, Jim.
So a week in, what percentage of the people who were living near Mass and Cass can you account for, Doctor?
When you say account for, you mean that we
know where they are?
Sure, absolutely. So, first off, this approach to the situation at Mass and Cass was a different approach. It was focused on public health and equity. And the reason we can account for anybody there is we actually did a survey, Jim, a pretty extensive survey of individuals in the beginning of December to understand what their individual needs were, their medical needs, their issues related to substance use disorder, their mental health needs. And those 145 people, which you've heard us speak about, those individuals are the ones that we were focused on in finding a viable option, a way for them to be transitioned out of those spaces. And at the end of our work on January 12th, I'm happy to say that 154 individuals were placed in one of those options you spoke about.
How many people was a viable option not found for, Doctor?
Yeah, so, to answer that, I'd like to explain a little bit of our technique. So when we looked at this way, we said, as you mentioned, Jim, these encampments are a symptom, right? They're a symptom of what is not working and what is failing within our systems for individuals who are unsheltered, many of whom are suffering from the medical illness of substance use disorder. Sure. So the first step for us in approaching this was, well, why are those individuals not able to avail themselves to the services that are there? So when we moved forward, the mayor set a deadline for us. She saw the urgency of this and she set a deadline. In order for us to address this issue, we said, how do we approach this differently so that it's a solution that is really person-focused and focused on the individuals who are living in those encampments? So what we did was talk to those individuals and set up new options that are low threshold options, which means it provides people with their basic needs and it provides people with the services that they need.
But how many people was such a viable option not matched up with? That's what I'm trying to find out, Doctor.
Right. So every day, outreach staff in the city and other nonprofit and private organizations go to these areas and talk to individuals. So once we started this project on December 15th, we spoke to individuals every day, 7 days a week, to talk to them about what their options are. Some individuals had other alternatives that they were going to. Some individuals couldn't decide at the time, and many individuals were able to avail themselves of these resources. So it's hard to put numbers on that because as you know, it's a transient group of individuals, but we offered everybody a place to go in order to be able to move the encampments. And the goal of the encampment moving, by the way, was in the safety of the individuals there, because having spent so much time there, I can tell you, Jim, the living situations there was
Yes.
atrocious, unsafe, and not good for the individuals.
Do you and the mayor yet know what the stage after the short-term transitional housing is for people who need it and want it? Do you know what that is yet or no?
So these temporary solutions that were put in place to fill this gap, these are temporary solutions. And now the work is happening to think about how to restructure our system. And we're in the process of that work, and I'll have more to share on that as soon as we're able to flesh that out a little bit more. But it's how to restructure our existing system so that individuals who are unsheltered, often suffering from substance use disorder, have a viable option of where they can go.
Is Long Island in the future mix? I know the mayor went out there, wasn't crazy about a reopening during the campaign, seemed to say it's at least a possibility, medium or long term. Is it a possibility? Bridge or no bridge?
All options are on the table. And we did go out there recently to say, as we think about our medium and long-term solutions, can Long Island fit into that? And we're looking at that. It hasn't been used in a while. The buildings need some work. We need to think about how we would transport people there and back safely, and what level of stability we'll need people to be in. I know you know this, Jim, but the individuals who we're serving are individuals who are very fragile, have multiple medical issues going on and other things that need to be cared for. These temporary solutions, we meet every day with the providers of these programs, and these temporary solutions are allowing them to meet some basic needs of shelter, food, support, so that they can begin to address those medical needs, those addiction needs, those mental health needs, and reintegrate with society.
It seems to me quickly, if we can, one option that was never seriously considered, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff Tompkins had offered South Bay Correctional providing exactly what you're suggesting. Mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment. He said to Shirley Leung the other day, we're still ready to assist, as you see there, and obviously it was primarily for people with outstanding warrants. His silence on that meant that thank you, but no thank you is the response?
We really appreciate Sheriff Tompkins' input, and one of the reasons I really appreciate it is because this is all of our problem, right? These are our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, and we have to lead with compassion and be creative and innovative. The mayor has asked us to transform the system, to transform the way we think about this. So we're leading with creativity and innovation. Specifically to the sheriff, we are in communications with him, and I went and visited the sites. They are locked cell-like sites that aren't appropriate for an individual who isn't involved in the system. But we continue to talk about creative options of how that space might be used for individuals who are appropriate.
What happens when, and this is inevitable, I assume you'd agree, when individuals return to the Mass and Cass area, when the weather breaks and it's spring and larger numbers of people return to the Mass and Cass area, what does the city do then, Doctor?
So our approach is very much about finding individuals viable options and not having the encampments return. Jim, as you know, during the pandemic, the issues of being unsheltered, the issues of having substance use disorder were just compounded and made so much worse. What we're working on now, the goal is for there not to be encampments at Mass and Cass. We have a citywide approach, which includes the police department, who are doing regular patrols of the area, and we are overseeing the area so that encampments don't come back. And as we look towards the future of the plan, we do not want the encampments to come back in the summertime. And these intermediate and long-term solutions are geared towards that. So it's really a citywide effort of helping individuals. And Jim, you may have heard that we talked about, would there need to be arrests? How will we approach these individuals? When we surveyed them, the vast majority of individuals said, yes, I would like to look at an alternative to being here. People do not want to live in those horrific conditions. And as we approached people are willing to move and look at these other alternatives. So even now, if we continue to engage people, this is just a step on a long journey to addressing these issues.
Dr. Bharel, before you go, I really have great praise for the mayor. Even if people aren't crazy about every detail of what she has done here, the fact that she attacked this issue so early on with so many issues confronting her, I think is praiseworthy. I want you, before you go, to disabuse me of my major concern about why this will never really be fixed, despite the fact that all of us who are not directly affected by what's going on in that neighborhood talk the talk. My sense is at the end of the day, if we're not directly affected, the vast majority of us don't really care terribly much about people suffering like those people are suffering. Can you, in 30 seconds, tell me I'm wrong?
The people who are there at the Mass and Cass area, who are outside, who are suffering from addiction, these are our neighbors, these are our family, these are our friends. We have to lead with compassion. This is a step in the right direction. We have a long journey ahead of us, and it'll take all of us working together to come up with creative, innovative solutions. Mayor Wu has given us the space to come up with transformative change that will truly change the system for the better and help the people that we're looking to aid.
Hope it happens, Dr. Bharel, and I hope people support it. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. Nice to talk with you.
Nice to talk to you, too. A prominent figure around town, Tanisha Sullivan, announced her candidacy for Secretary of State yesterday.
I've never shied away from tough issues. Believing in what's possible, working with others across the ideological spectrum, I've delivered policy change to help improve quality of life for all of us. And the past few years have caused me to reflect on the tough work we still have to do, the stagnant problems we still have to solve, and the fights we still have to win to strengthen our democracy. My name is Tanisha Sullivan.
Republican radio host and former chair for Black Voices for Trump in Massachusetts, Rayla Campbell, announced her candidacy in September. And so far, current longtime Secretary Democrat William Galvin has not officially said whether he'll seek an 8th term. Tanisha Sullivan, who I should note is also a member of the Board of Advisors here at GBH, joins me now. Tanisha, congratulations. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's great to be here.
Why are you running?
Well, I think at a moment in our history when we know that so many of us are looking at DC, looking at Congress with bewilderment, confusion, and frustration, quite frankly, as it relates to the snail's pace at which voting rights and voter access is being advanced. I believe that in this moment, all eyes on the states, all eyes on the states. And here in Massachusetts, as it is in across the country, the Secretary of State's office, one of the chief responsibilities is to help secure and protect our voting rights, and also to advance voting rights. And so in this urgent moment, I do believe it calls for us to usher in some new and fresh perspective on how we might be able to better protect and expand our democracy.
Can you tell me specifically, what would you do that hasn't been done legislatively in terms of voting rights in Massachusetts?
Yeah, this is something that I actually enjoy talking about, because I think in some respects, we have an idea that here in Massachusetts, everything is okay.
Yeah. And
the reality is that, whether we're talking about mail-in balloting, same-day voter registration, full implementation of ERIC, the electronic registration information system here in Massachusetts, we are actually behind other states. So first and foremost, we got to catch up. We cannot possibly even think about leading on issues relative to our democracy until we actually catch up. And then I do believe the conversation is about how we can expand access to the ballot box. I think that, we need to engage in conversations about the barriers that may still exist as we become an increasingly more diverse Massachusetts. How are we on access?
Tanisha, I want to same-day registration, mail-in voting, and I think something you were involved in, ranked choice voting, which obviously was defeated at the ballot. All three of those things are supported by the incumbent. If he decides to run, why you and not a guy who's been doing the job, who supports the same things you do?
Well, first, I do want to be clear that I respect Bill Galvin. I certainly respect his 40 plus years of public service and his 27 years in the office of Secretary of State. That said, this moment, I believe, requires a fresh perspective. We are at an inflection point in our democracy, Jim, right? And so, yes, the conversation about voting rights and voter access is a critical part of that. But what is also a part of that is the conversation and the work we need to do to further open our democracy. The Secretary of State's office has responsibility, oversight responsibility for our public records, for example. In this era, it is critically important that we are modernizing our access to our public records. In this moment, it is critically important that the Secretary of State's office is a champion, not only for voter participation, but for civic engagement. We need a culture of civic engagement here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
But Tanisha, if I may, he is the incumbent. I don't know if he's running. I don't think anybody knows if he's running. I watched your announcement. You don't mention Bill Galvin. You just praised him. But the reality is, if he were to run, you're basically saying to the voters, maybe not in these precise words, you should fire the guy who's done this job for decades and hire me. Don't you have to make a case that he doesn't deserve to continue, particularly after you just praised his decades of public service?
What I have to do is make the case to the voters and to my neighbors across the Commonwealth that there's a bigger vision for our democracy. What we have to do is help people to understand that when it comes to this office, the full suite of responsibilities that this office has within it, that there is more for all of us. It cannot be understated, especially in this moment, how important it is for us to expand our democracy. And part of that work is helping people to understand exactly what the Secretary of State's office does and what it can do. Because from that point, Jim, what we then have is an opportunity for all of us to fully engage with our government and to fully participate in our government. And that's what democracy is about. That's what the principles and the foundations of this country are all about.
You know, you mentioned public records, Tanisha, a second ago. I want to dwell on that for a minute. In your announcement, you talk about, just like you said here, more open government and more transparency in public records. Todd Wallach, when he was with the Globe, did terrific work, relentlessly reminding the public that we're the only state in the United States, the only state where all three, judiciary, governor's office, and the legislature do not believe, they believe they're exempt from public record laws. Would you lead the campaign to change that so we join the rest of America with public record laws being applicable to every branch of government where appropriate?
We absolutely need to do all we can to ensure that we have an open, transparent, and accessible government. Again, this is about a full democracy. And so we need to have the conversation about what information is available and what information is not. But we need to have that conversation in partnership with stakeholders, in partnership with community. You know, my work with the NAACP and other grassroots organizations has certainly been about tackling tough issues like this one that are complex, but we do that first by connecting with those who are most adversely impacted. You mentioned,
if I may, can I just interrupt for just 1 second? Yeah. I don't know any constituency that I have ever encountered that would be in favor of continuing to allow the exemption of all three branches of government from a public records law. So if you accept that premise, and you may not, I repeat, are you willing to say you'll lead the charge to end that and cause us not to be the outlier?
What I'm willing to say at this moment is that I will lead the charge in helping to ensure that we're having the conversation.
Okay.
It is right. And the reason I say that is because, yes, there is, I'll draw a very clear line on this point. We need to do all we can to ensure that public records are accessible, transparent, and that we have in place the supports to ensure that folks know how to use that information. At the same time, we need to ensure that we, especially in the big data era, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate security levels in place to protect data, because we know how data can be used in adverse ways.
One last thing, we only have 30 seconds left. Use the words fresh perspective twice. We have a pretty rotten history until a few years ago of electing women to statewide office. We have a zero record of electing women of color to constitutional office. When you say fresh perspective, is that in part what you're talking about, is diversifying the ranks of those who lead this state? And I literally have 15 seconds.
What I'm referring to is that in my experience, my legal experience, certainly my experience working on the ground in community, is a different perspective, does allow me to bring a different perspective and different experiences. And all of that is needed to help ensure that we have a full and vibrant and expansive democracy.
Tanisha, I wish you a lot of luck. I hope to see you a lot during the campaign, and thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, the Patriots season is over after an historically embarrassing wild card loss to the Bills this past weekend, the final coda of a disastrous tailspin for a team that boasted a 7-game winning streak just over a month ago. And to rub a little salt into the wound, Tom Brady and his Tampa Bay Bucks look like they're in championship form as they head into a matchup against the Rams, hoping to defend their Super Bowl title, while another former New England quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, his permanent one-day beard growth in tow, is moving on with the San Francisco 49ers as well, facing off against Green Bay Saturday after beating the Cowboys in a performance that led at least one man to wonder what might have been, tweeting not long after kickoff, Patriots would have had a better season with Garoppolo, though he obviously is much more expensive than current quarterback Jones. Joining me for more on the many roads not taken and whether the Patriots might still be able to build back better is Boston Globe senior NFL reporter Ben Volin. Ben, it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me tonight, Jim.
So I'm not into masochism, which means I don't want to look back. We're going to look forward. I'm going to give you 10, if I have enough time, 10 sort of lightning round questions about the future. You're the man to answer. Number one, will Kraft spend another boatload of money like he did this year after a one-and-done finish?
I don't think it's going to be the spending spree of last year. It was a record amount, $175 million fully guaranteed for over 20 players. The full bill, if you tally up the total contracts, over $350 million.
Yikes.
Some of that is funny money. But he was skeptical of doing that for 1 year. He had some comments where he said, we used to make fun of the teams that did this, and he had to be persuaded a little bit to open up his wallet that much. I think it's a tough ask to ask him to do that 2 years in a row, not to mention the guys they signed last year are all kind of locked in for a second year. So they have some moves to make, but it's not going to be the wild spree of last year.
Will Bill Belichick ever win another Super Bowl?
I unfortunately am going to say no. It's such a difficult challenge, and he only can control so much. You know, Tom Brady is the quarterback. He's the guy on the field. He has the ball in his hand pretty much every play, so he can affect the game. Bill Belichick is at the mercy of the players he can put on the field, obviously the draft, the salary cap, all that kind of stuff. And I just think they're far away right now. And that playoff blowout loss to the Bills kind of showed just how far away they are from the elite teams right now.
And in a bow, this question in a bow to your colleague Dan Shaughnessy and his column the other day, will Belichick fire his two sons? Both of whom, for those who don't know, one is the co-runner, theoretically, of the defense, which was just totally decimated, and the other one does something on defense. Are they gone, or is father going to protect sons?
I would be shocked if he fired his sons. I mean, the fact that he gets to work with his sons is one of the big reasons that Belichick has been sticking around. I think Bill, like many football coaches, feels some guilt over not being there enough for his kids early in their lives when they were growing up. And now that they're grown and have families of their own, to be able to work with them every day is, I think, a huge blessing for Belichick. And look, the nepotism thing is definitely a tricky subject. There's not going to be the accountability for Belichick's sons. It's just that's how it is. But at the same time, it may, they did grow up as the sons of Bill Belichick, so they probably do know a thing or two about football. But it's a bad look, or it's a tough look for the Patriots, and they might want to find a way to smooth things over in that front.
Okay, and next is, will Bill Belichick ever have another moment like this one? This is shortly after the loss to the Colts. He does a follow-up press conference and says the following.
Look, fellas, I apologize if, it seemed like I was a little short with you after the game. Obviously a frustrating game. Down 20-0, didn't do anything well enough. It's not your fault. It was a frustrating game.
Was that like a pod person? How surprised? I mean, you cover this team. Look at the look on your face. How surprised were you when he gave what seemed to be a totally sincere apology for the people he abuses every single day? What was up with that?
It was very sincere. And yeah, what have you done with the real Bill Belichick? I was not expecting an apology. I didn't think it was merited. He was obviously frustrated after the game, but understandably so. They didn't play very well, and I didn't find him to be more short or curt with us than he usually is. But so good for him for kind of acknowledging that he didn't present himself the best that night. And I just think he's in his as he's getting older. I do think he's more cognizant of legacy and how he wants to be remembered. And so just being the grumpy, gruff coach all the time, I think he realizes maybe isn't the best for his personal image.
Okay, so we heard Ben Volin say that Bill Belichick is unlikely to win another Super Bowl. Is that former quarterback of his, Tom Brady, likely to win another one, including possibly this one?
I mean, I should have learned by now to never doubt Tom Brady. They did not look like a Super Bowl team last year, the Tampa Bay Bucks, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it all clicked and it all came together, and they went on this incredible run. So right now, no, the Bucks do not look like the favorites in the NFC. I think it's probably the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers is playing so well, and the Bucks have just been really banged up this year. They're Brady's receivers. He lost his top receiver, Chris Godwin, to an injury. Guys like Gronk, Mike Evans, in and out of the lineup. So they're just still figuring things out. They're playing well. I think they're going to win this weekend, and Brady's going to go to the championship game again. I think it's a tall order to ask for a back-to-back Super Bowl.
Is that championship game the dream game against Jimmy Garoppolo, or is it Aaron Rodgers 2.0?
I really do want to pick the 49ers. I think they're playing very well right now. Two things give me pause. Garoppolo's fourth quarter last week, he really tried to give the game away through a really bad interception. And then, I don't know, I picked in the preseason, I picked Bills-Packers as my Super Bowl pick. The Packers have been the best team all season. I can't turn on them now. They have the bye, the home field advantage, Aaron Rodgers. It's hard to go against the Packers right now.
Okay, and final question. You spend a small portion of your life on WEI, one of the sports radio shows in town. So this is the $64 million question. Every time you turn on sports radio, doesn't matter what time it is, they're talking about Tom Brady. Here's the question. 10 years after Tom Brady is retired and selling a fashion line in TV12, will sports radio in Boston still be talking about Tom Brady from 6 a.m. till midnight?
Pretty close. I do think so. He's the standard around here. And as long as the Patriots are not winning a Super Bowl every season, he's always going to be the quarterback that we compare to. His era is always going to be the one we harken back to. And so, yeah, I do think we're going to be talking Tom Brady a lot. We're going to be comparing Mac Jones to him, whoever is after Mac Jones. And, unless it's not fair to Mac, but until he wins all these Super Bowls, Brady's still going to be the standard. And as long as Brady keeps playing, we're going to be talking about him too. I mean, he's 44 years old and can definitely play another year if he wants to. So he's doing a good job of keeping himself relevant in this market.
I'm glad you told the truth there. Ben Volin, it's great to see you. Love reading your stuff. Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe.